Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. And for those here and for some of our new friends, just to show you a few things that we have for you here as we go through our session. Um, you will notice there is a little space there for you to put your thoughts in and to chat with us. And so if you can pop into the attendee chat and just let us know where you're joining from around the province today on such a beautiful Tuesday morning. I pulled out sweaters and scarves. You know, I'm a summer person, but 2020 has taught me to live in the moment. Also, you'll notice if you do have a question, but you don't want it to be public, there's an opportunity at the top there just to click on the question box. You can put that in there. We have Gail and Rochelle waiting in the wings to answer all of your deep burning questions about managing mental modes. Or if you have any technical difficulties, also use that. And emojis, right? We can always use our emojis. Um, I know I love to see them. It's a quick way for me to say, to understand that you're still with me, right? You're still part of this webinar. And keep in mind, it's only half an hour, so we should be able to pull through this together, right? Oh, thanks everybody for putting that in there. I really appreciate it. Tona, Thompson, Dauphin, and of course Selkirk. That's where I'm joining you from as well today. Right on here in Selkirk, Manitoba. So managing mental modes. We were just saying before we went live, I put my daughter on the bus today. She is 11. She's not going into kindergarten or anything like that, but it was difficult. I'm not going to lie to you. And so I'm managing my own mental modes right now. I didn't cry when they went to kindergarten. I didn't cry when their tiny, tiny school bus picked them up from preschool, but I cried today. And I think it was just, so much overwhelm. And I think part of the crying is now I have to make my own lunch. My daughter usually cooks for me. So. Interesting. So again, welcome to this session. Just a few things before we hop into the meat and potatoes here is to let you know what we're about. So Workplace Education Manitoba, we're helping people to develop essential skills that are needed for work, learning, and life. And if there isn't a topic that helps us to succeed in work, learning, and life, here it is, our mental modes, because it affects us every single day in everything that we do. Our vision at WEM is that all Manitobans have access to the essential skills, knowledge, and training required to determine and pursue their goals related to learning the workplace and life. And those 9 essential skills, for just as a quick refresher: oral communication, thinking, reading, continuous learning, document use, computer use, writing, working with others, and numeracy. And so, you take a topic like managing our mental modes, and really we're looking at quite a few of these essential skills, namely thinking, right? Because a lot of this is happening on the inside and people are left looking at the outside. And so we have our thinking as well as oral communication. And of course, because you're here, we are working on continuous learning. Right on. Thank you for your comments, everybody. Appreciate it. We'd also like to give a big fat thank you to our contributors that make this training accessible to all Manitobans. So we'd like to express our appreciation to Employment and Social Development Canada and Manitoba Education and Training. This project was jointly funded through Human Resources Skills Development Canada and Entrepreneurship Training and Trade. And for more information, you can visit our, I call it again, the mothership, wem.mb.ca. And as many of you know, in the Interlake, we have our own website as well, which is weminterlake.ca, and I'll have that posted for you at the end of our session. And one thing that we have started up again is going into workplaces. And so if that's something that you're up for, having us into your place to do these sessions, most of our sessions, we can customize them to your workplace. A lot of them are just half day, which is great, right? Because we can get some learning in, have some collaboration, and then be able to still manage our inboxes and things like that. So if that's something you're curious about, having us in, just shoot us a message here and let us know in that private chat. And that's something that we can set up. How we can we go in and do an assessment and work with you to really see what's important. One thing that's value to me is to not waste people's time. And so when we go into your workplace, I want to make sure, as do my colleagues, that we're there for a purpose and that we're connecting that learning with your people. So that's something that's really important to us. Now, what the heck are mental modes? The next couple of slides, we're going to talk about what these mental modes are, and I would love for you, as we're going through them, thoughts that come to mind for you. So a mental mode, we say, is an explanation of someone's thought process about how something works in the real world. The reason we're bringing you this topic today is that it is part of one of our modules for our HR toolkit. HR Toolkit is 8 half-day sessions. And within each of those sessions, we're looking at the foundation and the fundamentals of human resource management. And a lot of times, I don't know if you guys have seen this in your workplaces or in previous workplaces, we're always doing more with less, yes, but depending on the size of the organization, we may not have an actual HR department, and a lot of those responsibilities are falling into our laps as supervisors. In one of our last sessions, we've held these a few times now in Selkirk the past couple of years. What we're noticing, and the comments from the people that have attended, they're saying things like, I didn't realize how much was involved. You know, we had one manager who oversees a small amount of staff and programming and things like this. She commented and said, I had no idea how much really was involved in HR. And so, not to scare you, but to invite you for that idea of continuous learning, and really what the wonderful thing is about having these in the communities. We're going to Arborg, as well as holding this in Selkirk this fall, is that you're able to commune with the folks that are in similar roles, right, that are taking on these HR responsibilities. And I think that was one of the greatest things. I kind of felt like this proud parent sitting back and watching my students as they interacted with one another and helped to solve, I kid you not, real life problems. And so, where some were working with nonprofit, some were for profit, and even just helping out at a fundraising activity. One organization said, wow, we've been wondering where we can donate our funds to this year. And here it was. And it was so amazing, you guys. I wish you were there. And thank you for popping this into the chat. Just so you guys know, I know I'm rambling on about it, but that's why we're bringing you this topic today. We talk about mental modes as a representation, right, of the surrounding world, the relationships between its various parts. So we want to keep in mind the thought process. How many of you would say, by show of thumbs up or thumbs down, that you recognize your thought processes from day to day? That you recognize, when you're telling yourself a story about a situation, when you're focused on facts, when you're focused on feelings, can you confidently say, I know what I'm thinking and when I'm thinking it? And that's amazing. I think for the most part, maybe we should ask the people around me, but I think for the most part, I would say I can catch myself, right? I might be in the middle of a thought and go, wait a minute. And I challenge, and some of you that know me, I don't love that word, but I do challenge my thinking, especially in those times where we're sniffing at a conflict or there's a disagreement or a misunderstanding, that we're able to challenge those mental modes that we have and say, okay, what's actually happening? We continue on to define these mental modes as a person's intuitive perception about his or her own acts and their consequences. I remember teaching a group of children one time, and I asked them about the word consequence. And it was interesting that they all defaulted to the negative, that when I disobey, there's a negative consequence, which, as adults, we know that to be true. But what was so great to do is to help them to understand that there are positive consequences when we choose right, when we make good choices, when we challenge that thinking, right? We can have good consequences. But we're talking today about those acts, our perception, and the consequences of our thought patterns and those mental modes, or some folks even call them mental traps that we find ourselves in. So acknowledging for us those consequences. I think of workplaces, also personal life. Um, when people ask for my opinion, surprisingly, people do ask me for my opinion. And, being able to give it without it being unsolicited is great. And to say, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? Because sometimes we get trapped in our own mental mode and we can't see around it. We can't see the other perspectives. And it's so important that we do that. And that we have someone, a mentor, someone in our life that we can say, hey, can you check my perspective here? I have this idea about a situation or an email, right? Who hasn't been there when we've misread or misunderstood written communication, right? And we can get those mind traps, mental modes, and then we end up with not so great consequences. Elizabeth Thornton said, "We all have mental modes, the lens through which we see the world that drives our responses to everything we experience. Being aware of your mental models, is key to being objective. And as leaders, as supervisors, as managers, we need to be objective. We need to be aware of our mental modes so that we can really understand what's driving us. And so if we can understand the way that we think, our processes, and how we we interpret what's happening around us. And that's why way back when, 2 years ago, the thought came to me, is it possible? And I know I've brought this up 1.5 million times. The perfect question when we recognize we're trapped in a mental mode, right? That we're maybe not reading the situation totally clearly. Is it possible that I'm misunderstanding? Is it possible that they misinterpreted what I was trying to say? Right? And so last Sunday, I stayed up late to watch, are you guys sitting down? Highway to Heaven. And it was a great episode. Some of them are always a little bit kind of weird or scary, but this one was so good. It's a total classic. Season 2, episode 11. It's a two-parter. That's why I stayed up late. And here I was the next day trying to explain this amazing episode of Highway to Heaven to my family. And it's clear as a bell to me. I can see the picture, I can see the images, I know the storyline, and here I am as an expert communicator explaining this. And my whole family, you see these foreheads kind of cocked to the side, like, I have no clue. And in fact, my big boy said, Mom, I have no idea what you're talking about. I cannot follow you. And I'm like, what do you mean? I stated it clearly, I explained all the characters. And that's where I went, wow, what's in my mind is clearly not coming out the way that I had hoped and dreamed it would. And so now we're lost in this. What the heck is she talking about? And have you guys ever had that? Show a thumbs up or thumbs down, where you're talking to someone, you know what you're saying is clear as day. And you can also tell that they have no clue what you're talking about. So again, expert communicator here, right, is like, oh, I know exactly what I'm saying and how to say it. No, like there are times where, what's in the mind doesn't always come out through the mouth or, even in our body language. These models are complex and they're rooted in human nature and they affect how we see the problems, how we even see people. Hashtag stereotypes sometimes, right? And depending on how we use them, these mental models can have incredibly constructive or destructive power. And that is so true. And speaking of perceptions, I had to bring it in. I'm pretty sure I put this in almost every single webinar, our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So when we look at our thoughts and our intentions, are they matching our behaviors? Because we don't know what people are thinking. We don't know what they're feeling or how they're feeling. All we have are those outside things, right? Words, tone, and body language, the behaviors. And so when we are seeing something from someone, whether it's written, spoken, or just through body language, is it matching their intention or their thoughts? And the same is true for us, right? We're seeing that look on their face and they're like, what? I don't get it. Or now someone's angry at something we've said. we're frustrated or there's this miscommunication, we're sniffing at conflict again. Is it possible that what came on that inside thought is not reaching to the outside part of my body through my words, tone, and body language? So, to put it simply, mental models are a set of beliefs and ideas that we consciously or unconsciously form based on our experiences. One of my mentors shared an experience that happened to her. She grew up in a, for lack of a better word and time, kind of a racist home where she's extremely, fair, blue eyes, blonde, and she grew up in a town that either you were that or you were indigenous. And so as a little girl, they were walking down the street. Her parents would pull her and say, "We're crossing the street. We're not walking on the same side of the road as those people." So fast forward to her in Montreal going to university with her boyfriend, arm in arm, walking down the sidewalk where, I don't know if you guys have been to Montreal, kind of like Winnipeg in the sense that the whole world lives there. Um, I lived there for a year and a half, and it was so amazing, right, to be able to just be immersed in the world's culture. And anyway, as she's walking arm in arm, um, her boyfriend's looking back and says, "Why are we crossing the road?" And so, although, it was a big wake up for her, although she doesn't hold those beliefs, she's probably one of the most open minded and kind and compassionate people I know. There was something unconsciously in her from nature and nurture, maybe more nurture than nature, that pulled her across the road. And she went, "Oh my gosh, this isn't a belief I hold. Why am I doing this?" And sometimes we have those, right? And I don't know, take nothing like a pandemic to bring out all the crazy in everybody, right? These polarizing topics that we're seeing that are really causing a lot of conflict in the world. Our mental models guide our thoughts and our behaviors. They help us to understand life, and they're thinking tools, shortcuts for reasoning. So we're going to go through a few of them, different ways of thinking, not like the 6 thinking hats for problem solving, but a little bit different than that. If we look at this, we look at our mental mode and how it affects our behavior, and then the result of that. So again, remember when I was teaching those little kids, consequences, right? The consequences of those mental modes in our behavior come into result. And then there's a reinforcement of that. So we're reinforcing that mental mode of ours that we're correct, or it's being challenged with a question like, is it possible? Right? And so keep that in mind that, this cycle can be great. It can be really awesome until we're wrong. And those of you that work in customer service, you may have heard the phrase, the customer is always right. And I agree with that, except for when they're wrong. And the same thing is with our thinking, right? Our thinking patterns are always right, except for when they're wrong. And being able to have the courage it takes to challenge those. So how do we master our mental modes? I talk about my phrases, right? Each year has a phrase, and it dawned on me today because I haven't had a phrase yet for 2020 other than "what the heck." But the phrase today is, "Am I distracted?" And our mental modes can distract us from what matters most. And so I invite you to think about that question today in your life. What am I distracted by? Am I distracted by anger? Am I distracted by the news? Am I distracted by someone wearing a mask? Am I distracted by someone not wearing a mask? Right? What is it that's pulling me away from what matters most? So how do we master our mental modes? Number one is to be aware of our thinking, and by asking ourselves those types of provoking questions. Gather information, challenge your thinking with, wait for it, facts, right? The cold weather, yes, definitely. But yeah, let's challenge our thinking with actual facts and not just the stories we tell ourselves. So often we are trapped, again, I use the word trapped, in the stories that we're telling ourselves, what's going on the inside. And often the stories we tell ourselves aren't true. Sometimes they are, but often we're missing a piece of the puzzle. We don't have the full picture. And for whatever reason, we can't seem to bust out of that mental mode and look at it in another light. And so again, is it possible, let's combine two, is it possible that I'm being distracted by the stories that I tell myself? I would say the answer is yes. Yes, that is possible. And some of these hard questions, like inquire into other people's thinking, challenging their views. Now, there are ways to do that without creating contention. That's interesting thought. What makes you think that? Right? More people would use that, especially on the social medias or in team meetings, right? Oh, I want to learn more about that. Help me to understand. I love phrases like that because it's not an attacking. It's literally asking for help. Second part, resist jumping to conclusions and suspend your assumptions, right? Approach with curiosity. Suspend judgment and approach with curiosity. And then for looking for those recurring thought patterns and try to unlearn them, right? The customer is always right, except for when they're wrong. Our mental modes are always right, except for when they're wrong. And look for those patterns and try to unlearn them, which I'm not going to joke is can be challenging. Part of this in mastering our managing our mental modes is thinking about our team. Let's think about our teams at work and helping to build a shared vision. And if we are open-minded, we're inviting those questionings, we're suspending judgment and approaching with curiosity, how amazing would that be if we could have that same shared vision with our team? So either we're building it or we are sharing the built vision. Maybe we're already there, but it's important to share that. And we know that it's essential in building a successful learning organization because that's where that idea of there's no stupid question, right? If we can have that learning environment, then those mental modes stand a chance of opening up and assessing what's actually happening. And then we can say here, a shared vision gives employees energy and focus, right? I love that. It's been said that you learn best when you seek to accomplish things that matter to you. So again, looking at our mental modes, challenging our belief system, and asking ourselves, do we even know what matters to us, right? It's important for us to know what matters. Because if we don't know what matters, then those mental modes are going to, keep running off the tracks. So I would love to hear from you guys just in the chat here, listing one thing that matters to you. Think about your workplace. What matters? I'll start us off. I'm going to steal the easy one. Like clear, open communication matters to me. But what am I going to do then to make sure that that's happening? Okay. So we're accomplishing things that matter to us, right? What else matters to you? And as you're typing that in, because I'm still asking for it, this is an actual question. I wanted to continue with this thought because even as I was preparing this, I'm like, enough with the shared vision already. And yet, a compelling vision enables the leader to anticipate an exciting future. And my guess is that future is chock full of change. And when confidently communicated to the team, it energizes everyone into accomplishing big things. Look at this amazing list you guys have created. Respectful relationships, equal opportunity, diligence, honesty, respect, engagement. Yes, please. Right? All of the above. So yes, let's do this. Let's accomplish big things. And here's today's another truth. We've got a few truths today. Unless and until you instill a sense of purpose in your team, you will have a hard time truly getting the best performance from them. Is that not true? Right? That sense of purpose. I love this, Regina. Yeah, response to tolerance, open to change. Thank you. Suggestions. Yes, please. And so I pulled a quote here from French writer Antoine de Saint, I don't know how to say that next part, Exupéry. When I was in Living in Montreal, I spoke Spanish, so yo hablo español. And I love this quote. See how it applies to you and your team. If you want to build a ship, don't herd people together to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Shared vision, friends, bigger picture, and then recognizing those strengths and understanding our mind traps so that we can get there. Yes, good points. Thank you. It's understanding the map of reality is not reality. So even the best maps are imperfect. That's because they're reductions of what they represent. It's a map, right? It can be a snapshot in time. It could represent something that even no longer exists. And I love this idea when we consider our mental modes. It's important to keep in mind as we think through problems and make better decisions. We get trapped sometimes in the past, right? Or what the map looked like, or what it should look like, or we're not there yet. What about ego? Excuse me. When ego and not competence drives what we undertake, we have blind spots. And we know in leadership we cannot have ego. We will not be able to build what you guys have listed here, respect and engagement specifically, if we've got ego hanging in the way. So if you know what you understand, you know where you have an edge over others. When you are honest about where your knowledge is lacking and know where you are vulnerable and where you can improve, this is how we move forward, right? And what about reasoning? Understanding first principles. Now, this idea of first principles, we have a little picture here of the stairs, that first step. Reasoning from first principles is a tool to help clarify complicated problems by separating the underlying ideas or facts from any assumptions, right? Taking our facts and pulling them out. If we think about six hats thinking, that white hat represents the facts. And sometimes we're so quick to jump into the other ways of thinking that we forget the facts. And it's really one of the greatest places to start. If you know the first principles of something, you can build the rest of your knowledge around them to produce something new and to be able to move forward. What about thought experiments, right? That challenging that thinking, is it possible? Thought experiments are powerful because they help us learn from our mistakes and avoid future ones, hopefully. Some of us seem to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. But we can stop that, guys. They let us take on the impossible, evaluate potential consequences of our actions, and re-examine history to make better decisions. I think that's what the power of journaling is too, right? We can go back and go, wow, I made it through that really challenging time. This is what I did. And guess what? I would probably do the same thing again. Or, hey, I would totally change this, right? Learning from our mistakes and learning from our successes. Mhm. I love this last thought. They can help us both figure out what we really want and the best way to get there. And back to that idea of what matters most. The truth is, we cannot keep all of the details of the world in our brains. So we use these models to simplify the complex into understandable and organizable chunks. And especially when we're dealing with dun, 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 people. The better we understand our mental modes, the better leaders we become. I hope, friends, that that has been helpful for you today to be able to recognize some of those mind traps that you may have. Am I focused only on feelings and not facts, or vice versa? Am I able to challenge my thinking when I'm faced with, an unpleasant situation, or when I'm dealing with conflict between two of my employees, or with my customers, or a colleague, or whoever it is? Am I able to challenge my thinking on inside and outside of work, stereotypes, political views, like, so much. We could spend the next 3 hours just listing all of the ways that we could, or all of the things we could be trapped about. My hopes and dreams for our session today would be that we today will ask ourselves those tough questions, like, what am I being distracted by? What matters to me the most? And challenge your thinking, especially in those tricky times. Thank you so much for joining. Here's our website for more information for upcoming sessions. For those of you interested in HR Toolkit, again, and it's an 8-part series. In Arborg, we're probably going to pound through 2 in one day. We're looking at that. In Selkirk, it'll be half-day sessions. So again, if this is something you're interested in, and if there's enough people, maybe we would even consider an online session, but you'd have to let us know that. All right, thank you so much.